Hello and welcome to the John Ark Show. Today we're going to interview military hero and legendary SR-71 Air Force pilot Brian Shul. He is a Vietnam War era pilot and a retired major in the United States Air Force. He flew 212 combat missions and was shot down near the end of the war. He was so badly burned as a result of that he was given next to no chance to live. However, his extraordinary willpower allowed him to not only return to full flight status, but he went on to become one of only 94 people on the face of the earth to fly the SR-71 Blackbird spy plane. He then completed a 20-year career in the Air Force, after which he wrote 4 books, including one called Sled Driver, where he describes his time as an SR-71 pilot. Today, he runs a photo studio called Gallery One in Marysville, California. We're going to have a lot of great celebrity interviews coming up, so I encourage you to click on that notification bell so you can be notified every time we upload a new episode. We also ask that you post a link of today's show on all your social media to help spread the word. Now, let's say hello to the legendary SR-71 Air Force pilot, Brian Shul. Hello, Brian. Welcome to the John Ark Show. How are you today, sir?
Very good. Thank you for having me.
Oh, it's a real pleasure and an honor to have you on the show. Let's begin with, did you always know at an early age that you wanted to be a pilot?
Well, yeah, I kind of, when I was about 8 years old, I went to a big air show and I was pretty blown away by the magnificence of jets flying in my face and saw the Thunderbirds and Blue Angels. And it's a big show in Washington, D.C. there on Memorial Day at Andrews. And it really, I always tell people I lost my virginity to an air show at a very young age, and that was it. I really felt like that's something I wanted to do. My parents thought I'd outgrow it, but sadly I did not.
You know, air shows are always impressive, but for some reason, as a kid, they're unbelievably impressive. You know?
Well, yeah, it's something you see for the first time. You had no idea there was such force, power, and sound in front of you, and this machine was beyond anything that any car or bicycle had done for you. So it was quite impressive.
I remember
Left an indelible mark.
I remember the first time I went to an air show. They had F-16s flying directly overhead, very low, and I had earplugs in, and it was so loud that I still had to check my ears to see if there was brain matter oozing out. It was unbelievably loud.
Well, in those days, in the 50s, when I went, there were no earplugs or anything, and they flew a lot lower and a lot closer to the crowd than they do now. And we're talking F-100s and older jets. We saw B-58 Hustler make a pass that day. So, I mean, it was quite the era of big time air shows, and it made a big impression on me.
Now, is it as loud inside the plane as it is outside, or do you have
No, not at all. Of course not. You're sitting at forward of those engines, and you're pretty airtight in there with your helmet on and everything. You feel the power. You don't hear it like they do on the ground, of course.
Now, you flew 212 close air support missions in Vietnam. Near the end of hostilities, your T28 was shot down near the Cambodian border. That is an unbelievable story. Can you tell it to us?
Well, it was just a routine training mission, really. I was supposed to deliver some cadmium batteries to a forward location down near Nam Phang, and I never really even knew I was being shot at or anything, and I just thought I had some kind of weird catastrophic engine failure that didn't make any sense. And only later did I find out they said they thought that's what had happened. But all I knew, I was going down and I couldn't get out of the airplane. We had no ejection seat in that particular plane, and was going to have to impact the jungle, and was not too happy about that.
Now, once you arrived at the military hospital in Okinawa, doctors believed that you would not survive your burns. You then underwent 15 major operations. They say that burn pain is the worst kind of pain in the world. How did you endure that kind of pain and that entire situation?
Well, it's a good question, and it's kind of part of the topic I talk about in my talks and that I do all over. And I tell people it's all about attitude. It's nothing to do with physical strength or being tough or anything like that. It is bad pain, and pain's relative. There's all kinds of different kinds of pain you can have. For me, it was keeping a positive attitude and a mental state, which really has a lot to do with your healing physically. People don't realize that, but it really is. So my body had been pretty much destroyed to the part of getting any strength out of it. So it was strictly a mental thing. You had to want to survive and go through that each day. You had to forcefully, mentally keep a positive attitude about it, that somehow you were going to get through this. And that's hard. I will admit there were days when I didn't feel very positive, and there were days I wanted to quit, days that I just gave up. And it was kind of in God's hands. We're not in control of everything. I was a big baby and screaming and crying and cursing my attendants, but they did such a good job. I had 2 months there in intensive care, and then they flew me back to Fort Sam Houston, where I spent nearly a year. But people want to make it something heroic out of my story, or give me more credit than I deserve. And the fact is, I had a lot of good people helping me, a lot of really good surgeons and therapists. But as far as getting through it, you have to come to grips with first realizing it's actually happened to you. It's not a bad dream. And then secondly, no one in their right mind can withstand that kind of pain every day. It's just not human. It's not normal. So you just have to find ways mentally to, some people screamed a lot. I didn't as much. Some people just gritted their teeth, and that's kind of me. Other people just died in the hospital and gave up. And I was near that. I got close to that. And then I caught myself mentally. I saw my weight go from like 180 pounds to 119. And so you didn't have a lot of strength physically. So you really got in touch with your inner self, you might say. I'm laughing now, but it is a serious concept. That attitude is everything. And one thing I do say in my talks to people is, you can go weeks without food, you can go days without water, and you can even last a few minutes without oxygen. But when you lose hope, you're dead. You've lost everything. And that sounds trite or simple, but in reality, that's the best answer I could give you as to why I'm even still here today.
Do you think some people lose hope because they feel they have a less of a life to look forward to after this sort of accident?
If you'd asked me that question years ago, I'd have said, no, I can't imagine that. But my year in the hospital showed me that I was the lucky one. I had something in life I really wanted to go back to that motivated me and was a big inspiration to me to try to get back to flying and everything. Even though I didn't think I would, it was still a goal or some carrot you could put in front of me to help me get through each day. I found there were some people who honestly had not found their true passion in life. And it was very hard for them to even imagine, why should I go through this for another day?
Yeah.
I
think
saw that, and it was very sad. And I'd never encountered that before, being in, working with and hanging around a lot of very highly motivated people. Sadly, if you have no passion in life and you have nothing to fight for, to get back to, and I didn't know what to say to those people. It was like a foreign language to me.
I used to go visit a very sick relative who she was in a care facility, and you'd walk down this long hallway to get to her room, and you'd look into the various rooms as you're walking past, and you could see on the faces which people had relatives visiting them and which people never had relatives visiting them. And the light of the people who had nobody visiting month after month, year after year, the light was completely gone in their faces. And those that had people visiting them obviously looked much better. And I suspect there's a little bit of that going on in your situation when it comes to recovery.
When I got to Fort Sam Houston, I was in a bigger hospital. I saw other patients around me, about 15 or 20 other people. And you saw the full gamut of giving up, blank stare, just want to die, to people who are really fighting hard and trying. And a lot of it had to do with how they view their own life and what they were doing in life and how they perceive things. And again, it's all attitude. And I talked to some of these people, and I, if the first question you ask is, well, what motivates you in life and all, and they say nothing, I didn't know where to go with that. It's really something I don't think I've ever really felt completely. I mean, I kind of gave up a little bit in the hospital, but that was very short term.
Yeah.
So that you're right. It's a very difficult personal thing.
Now, after Vietnam, you volunteered for and you were selected to fly the SR-71 Blackbird. This assignment required an astronaut type physical just to qualify, and you passed that with no waivers at all. For those people who don't know, the SR-71 was widely regarded as the fastest jet aircraft in the world, reaching Mach 3.3 or 2,100 miles per hour. How difficult was it to qualify to be an SR-71 pilot and to learn to fly this plane?
Well, let me just back up just a second. I didn't get out of the hospital and go right to this airplane. I had 12 years of flying out of the hospital in the T-38s, in the A-10. I was in the first A-10 squadron. Flew A-7s at Myrtle Beach. So I had I had about 12 years. Then I applied to fly the world's fastest jet. So I didn't go from the hospital bed to a spacesuit. It did feel, I had 2 days to get from the hospital though to back to jets, and that was kind of traumatic. That's another story. But there came a point when I did volunteer to fly this airplane, and they said, well, I don't think you can do that because you got to wear a spacesuit and you have all this scar tissue and everything. And I the scar tissue didn't have any effect on anything. They were just, no one had ever applied to do it, coming back from that kind of injury. But I did have no waivers. I could pass the physical. I did very well on the astronaut physical. The thing about me was I was burned externally badly, but I had no internal injuries. There were no internal problems with my lungs, heart, vision, anything. So that made, it's like he looked like he couldn't do it, but internally he really could. And I passed the physical fine.
What makes a fighter jet, what makes an astronaut physical more challenging to pass than a fighter plane physical?
Well, it's just a little more thorough. It takes 2 days. You get way more detailed testing of the brain waves, the heart, things that pilots don't want you to get too involved in because they may find something. And that's one of the things a lot of guys didn't volunteer for this program. Because if you flunk the astronaut physical, you're never going to go back to flying anything then. So some people were nervous that they were going to inspect your body into that degree. I thought if there's something wrong there, I'd like to find out. But so you just went through a little more testing, and it was interesting. And they did a full 2 days at Travis Air Force Base there, and I passed with flying colors. So if you really want to do something, the thing I was always amazed at is people had 100 reasons why I shouldn't do this. You won't flunk the physical, you won't be able to do it, your scar tissue, blah, blah, blah. And I thought, okay, that's true, that could happen, but what if I actually could do it? And I had missed the opportunity with this fear of failure. And I just thought that'd be a bigger tragedy, wouldn't it? So my way of thinking was, if that's what you really want to do, that's what your passion is, then try it. And
have you always had this level of determination in all aspects of your life, or is it just
I'm beginning to think I did as a little kid. When I look back at my life, I didn't realize I did. I was just sort of stubborn, against the grain, kind of bear down and just do it. And I had really good, I had good mentors. My dad was a Marine for 32 years. I grew up on Marine bases. I had a gunny sergeant as a Boy Scout troop master who didn't hesitate to kick you in the butt if you weren't moving fast enough. So I have to say my training as a young boy was, hey, buckle up and get it done, and no crying about it. And either you can do it or you can't.
So at some
So
point, go ahead, go ahead.
I guess in a way I didn't realize that till I get out in the world. I thought everybody had pretty strong convictions and motivations about things they were doing, and not everybody did.
So at some point, you fly the SR-71. How dramatic is the difference between flying a normal jet and flying an SR-71?
It's pretty dramatic. Subsonically, it's basically a big jet, and it's that flies real honest. It's nothing, magical. It's just big and powerful. But getting up to high speed and doing what this airplane does, you had to learn kind of some new systems and new ways of managing and being a cockpit manager of the inlet system and the airflow. And these are things you didn't worry about in other jets. They just happened automatically. But the secret of why this airplane could get up to those speeds and sustain those speeds, and other jets couldn't do it, that inlet system was what you had to learn to do. And it took 1 year of training in the simulator and flying to be checked out in this airplane. And it was because you had to learn some new things that you didn't have to worry about in other jets. It was a very sophisticated inlet system, and you had to manage and be aware of many things happening at once as the jet accelerated, temperatures, altitudes, and pressures. So you had more cockpit duties. You became not just the surgeon, you became the chief surgeon and in charge of everybody in the hospital all at the same time. So this was new, and it required a lot more attention, and a lot more concentration. So I would say cerebrally, and that's a pretty big word for fighter pilot to use, but this jet challenged you.
Now, were there any early computer systems in that plane, or was the only computer the one between your ears?
Yeah, pretty much. Now, in the 80s, when I got to the program, my backseater and I were like the first guys to fly the jet with the new computer system installed, which didn't do much for you except to monitor systems that might fail. So it just gave you a heads up. But basically, it was a 57 Chevy. This jet was so basic in its 50s and 60s mentality of design, but so brilliantly built and designed that it lasted for another 30 years in beautifully. It was just such an anomaly. They said you could never build a jet out of titanium, and they did. They said it would never work to sustain these kind of speeds. The engines would choke out. You wouldn't carry enough fuel, it'd get overheated. And they overcame every one of these problems. And I always tell people I kind of associated with the jet, and in that everyone said, no, you can't do it. And it ended up not only working, but being the most remarkable aircraft of the 20th century. And for it to still hold every speed and altitude record, as you and I are sitting here today in 2022, that's speaks volumes for the job Kelly Johnson, Ben Rich, and the Lockheed guys did.
For people who've never seen an SR-71 in person and on display at a museum, when you see it, when it's directly in front of you, this is a plane that even though it's standing still, it still looks like it's going 2,000 miles an hour. It is beautiful.
It's an elegant airplane that looks different from every angle, and you're right, it just looks fast sitting on the ramp.
How long was the average mission?
Anywhere from 3 to 6 hours. We had short missions that were like three and a half hours, and then we had longer missions that could be, and it was six and a half.
And did you have to engage the afterburners to go supersonic, or were there afterburners on this design?
Oh yes, there were very big afterburners, and you cruised in afterburner. Again, different than any other jet that would have run out of gas in 10 or 12 minutes. This airplane would sit up there for over an hour in burner cruising. And again, that's the beauty and the genius of how they built this airplane, taking technology of the era and combining it in a way that hadn't been done before, in a very complex inlet system and design that was just remarkable. And you were awed by the airplane every day you flew it. I always say it would simultaneously impress you, scare you, and thrill you all every day that you flew it, because it was a unique creation.
Now, when you're flying to some distant location, at what point do you kick in the full afterburners? Is
Well,
it
you right after takeoff, you hit a tanker because you take off with half a load of fuel so that you're not too heavy.
right?
So when you top off and come off the tanker, you light the burners at that time to accelerate into your climb. So you're going from, say, 26,000 feet, you want to climb up to about 80,000 feet to get into your mission. So you're in burner right off the tanker. And you're real heavy, you're slow then, you're only at 300 knots. And you pretty much stay in burner for the next hour.
And how long does it take you to how long does it take you to go from 300 knots to 2100 miles per hour?
It takes about 15 minutes to come off the burner and then level off up close to 80,000 feet. So it was about a 15-minute climb.
And when you do that, does it throw you back into the seat or is it gradual?
Well, it's not quite that dramatic, but you do feel it. There's no doubt about it. You feel every heartbeat of that airplane. And I flew a lot of airplanes that didn't even have burner. The A-10, the A-7, we didn't have a burner. The T-38 had little mini baby burners. So for me, this was like a big time afterburner. It was like going to the ultimate burner light off. And they sat 100 feet behind you, but you felt it, and it felt good. It was a really good, solid feeling.
Now, even though you're wearing a special suit, which I assume cooled you, could you still feel the exterior of the plane getting hot at full speed? And did the windows also get hot?
Absolutely. The windows got up to 865 degrees. And I know this because I put my glove up against the window one day when I lost spacesuit heating, and it got very cold. And I was trying to heat my hands, and that worked for a little while. And then I singed the glove so bad, and my hand got really hot, and they had to repair the glove. But yeah, the jet heated up quite a bit, 900 degrees Fahrenheit on most of the leading edges. But you were supposed to be in your spacesuit had a knob for heating and cooling, but it never did a full. It wasn't perfect,
Did anyone ever try to kill you with an anti-aircraft missile on one of your missions?
Yes,
Really?
yes,
And
they did.
could you see the missile
No,
launching? No.
no, not at all. You are so high and so far, going so fast that you have to realize the guy shooting the missile has to lead you by 32 miles. So in that time, the missile takes maybe 20 seconds to get up to your altitude, maybe 30 seconds. And so you have time to turn the airplane away. And now that missile has to compute a new lead point, and it runs out of fuel. The missiles don't have a longevity of fuel burn time. So that's how you defeat them.
You're saying he has to fire 32 miles ahead of you to anticipate where you're going to be?
Well, yeah, because he's at ground level, and I might be at 86,000 feet, doing a mile every 2 seconds. Yeah.
And does the missile detonate if it can't get close enough? Does it detonate?
Some of the missiles did, but they tried everything. The thing we feared most was some of the new MiGs. They could put air-to-air missiles on the MiGs, and they could zoom climb to 50 or 60,000 feet and launch a missile from there, which would give them a better chance. But in 25 years of operational service, they never shot one of these airplanes down ever.
Could you ever feel the blast from a missile that detonated miles away?
No.
Interesting. Now, what
Most of the time, the missiles would just fall back to Earth, burn out. They burn out, and but we didn't get shot at on every mission. People eventually realized it was just embarrassing, and they didn't keep shooting.
What did it cost to build an SR-71 back in the day?
People ask me that. I have no idea. All I know is it cost about $100,000 an hour to run the thing. But boy, back in the 1962 dollars, I don't know. You couldn't even afford to build this airplane today. But You know, they did a lot of things back then. It was just a great era for aviation.
How many miles did it take to execute a right turn when traveling at 2,000 miles an hour?
Well, I think the expression is if you start your turn in Texas, you're going to roll out in Oklahoma or something like that. But
Interesting.
it was like a 380-mile turn radius. I mean, depending on your speed, and it wasn't a high G airplane. You weren't going to make any tight Thunderbird turns, or you had to keep the G loads pretty nominal, around 3, 2.5, because the airplane was real long, and you could break that airplane in half at those speeds. You had to be very gentle.
How much fuel do you burn at 2,000 miles an hour?
A lot. We carry 80,000 pounds of fuel, which is about 13,000 gallons, and we go through it in about an hour and a half. Yeah, it's a lot of fuel.
Were you ever chased by enemy jets trying to shoot you down?
They tell at one time we did see the contrails of jets coming up out of the Soviet Union, and in the frozen Arctic sky we did see. And then they just ran out of gas and ideas and started getting puffy around 70,000 feet or something, and they just fell back to earth. They had to get home. But you didn't see that very often. But one of the funny things happened to us one day is we were refueling on the tanker over the North Sea, and a couple Norwegian F-16s came out to intercept us, and they knew what we were and everything. So they're just riding on the wing, enjoying it, waving and taking pictures with their camera. And then when we came off the boom, they want to race, they're like, hey, we're going to drag race you here. And they, of course, scooted out ahead of us because we're pretty heavy at that point. I told my man in the back, said, just hang on a minute here. We lit the burners, and then 10 seconds later, we went blazing right past them. I'm sure they went back to their squadron.
It doesn't surprise me that
they were to tell that story.
Yeah, it doesn't surprise me that they were taking photographs, because that plane literally looks like part UFO, part fighter. It's just an amazing plane.
Everybody knew about it, and we had a lot of friendlies. Sometimes in Great Britain, the Jaguars sometimes would come up, and so, I mean, people love getting up near, getting a picture and everything. It was a beautiful thing to see in flight.
What was the most challenging thing about flying that plane?
Boy, there were so many. You want me to pick one?
Yeah, pick one.
I think just getting in tune with all the idiosyncrasies of the airplane, because every day it was different, because temperatures change, atmospheric pressures change, the mission changes. So just staying ahead of all of the iterations of a single mission. You didn't realize how much you had to have in your head until you quit doing it. And when I got out of the Air Force and I wasn't doing it anymore, you realize, wow, it was such a pressure thing. And the thing was, you can't hurt the airplane. Don't dare hurt the airplane. You can die. We can train a new pilot, but you better bring that airplane back first. And we can't build any more new ones. So
without revealing
national treasure,
without revealing any secrets, can you tell us about one of your more dangerous missions?
Well, my second book I wrote on the Untouchables covers our whole 3 days during the Libya crisis, where we were in England and we flew 3 missions in 3 days, which you don't really want to do in this airplane. Gaddafi was not real happy. The F-111s had already bombed his terrorist camps and everything. And so they did fire some missiles at us. But those 3 days were so exciting and scary and just meaningful. President Reagan was making a statement, and we were happy to be flying the Blackbird and zipping across Libya. I saw places I would never normally see over North Africa. I looked down, I could see the Straits of Gibraltar, and it was just a beautiful part of the world that you normally wouldn't be flying over. But those 3 days were excruciatingly exciting and holding your breath kind of thing. As far as scary times, we did have an inlet let go on us over North Korea one night in a turn, which you don't want to have happen. And the jet was kind of ready to break in half there. And we were able to somehow corral it down to slower speeds and limp home to Okinawa. And there was hydraulic fluid across the whole side of the jet we landed. And they said, we don't know how you flew this thing back.
So when you said the inlet let go, does that mean it would not move to the correct position?
Well, it was moving full aft, full forward, just like a pinball machine, which they'd never even seen that happen before. So, and we had neither. It was an eye opener for us. So we luckily had a lot of good simulator training. We got that jet slowed down, came down, and it was at night that made it worse. So everyone had some scary moments in the airplane. You ask anyone who flew it, they'll have certain those stories where you're holding your breath and going like, oh my God, you know.
So what do you think of some of America's modern planes like the F-35, for example?
Well, I think that they're fantastic technology. I can't say I've flown them or have really been in the inner workings of them, but I think that I guess what amazes me is how long it takes to get an airplane built and online. It's like 20 years. So by the time it gets here, half of it's already obsolete, and the other half we've changed strategies. I mean, and that's just from some old civilian talking here, but the technology is Star Wars. It puts such a load on the pilot too. I mean, it's very, very difficult to employ. But what bothers me the most is how little flying hours the guys are really getting today, and how little training people are getting out. Saying, "Yeah, I'm flying the greatest jets in the world. I want to get out of the Air Force. I'm not getting to fly enough, and I'm just doing all this other rotations and away from home." And if you're not going to let people train properly and fly the airplanes, that's what concerns me. I have a lot of friends that are still in the business, but as far as the technology, I mean, I read all about it, and I think, wow, that is amazing.
What do you
I
think
read
of
about the A-10s in Afghanistan. I was in the first A-10 squadron. We didn't have any of that electronics in the airplane whatsoever. It was just a blank panels, and it was look out the window, see where you're going.
Isn't the A-10
I'm
is that
so
the
happy those guys have all that good stuff in there.
is the A-10 the Warthog? Is that the plane?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's an amazing plane. They keep trying to retire it, but they
I
can't.
know.
It's just too good. So, what do you think about some of Russia's and China's new fighters?
Well, they're again obviously good. Every time we get to see some of those Russian fighters up close, even some of the Chinese, we see they're not as well made in many ways. We see that our stuff is superior, and the one edge we've always had up till I can't speak for now, but that we had superior training. We had some of the best pilots in the world, not because we're just born that way. It's because our training gave them the hours, gave them the exercises. They went out to Nellis, did the red flag thing. Guys were being trained and knew how to employ their airplane when called upon. So, I mean, we look at some of the other weaponry around the world now. It's pretty impressive, and there's a lot of it. You know, if you have a MiG fighter or a Chinese fighter that's a little less than, say, an F-22, but you've got 10,000 of them. We only have 80 of ours. That says something. So, it's a dangerous world out there, is the best you can say.
I'm amazed at how quickly the Chinese can copy our designs.
Well, I'm not. Why are we amazed at this point? It's a fact of life.
So, we did some research and we were surprised at how inexpensively civilians can purchase used military jets for. We did some research and found that you can purchase an American F-86 Sabre for $275,000. A Russian MiG-21 can be bought for $180,000, and a Russian MiG-15 can be bought for $85,000. This means that you can now purchase a MiG-15 for roughly the price of a sports car.
But I don't think you're going to be flying that airplane anytime soon, because then you have to buy all the spare parts, all the maintenance, all the fuel, all the retrofitting, and all the work that needs to be done on that airplane to get it airworthy. So no one's buying those because it's just prohibitive. Yeah.
Have you ever thought about buying your own private jet?
No, not really, because I know what it would take to maintain it and the cost of flying it. That's why even at air shows they've stopped flying a lot of the old jets and all. They just can't keep financially. spare parts, just keeping them going, and it's just a real difficult thing. They're pretty delicate things, and they're very specific to certain parts that they don't even manufacture anymore. And time moves on. We're always into the new technology.
Now, I had a guy from Eastern Europe try to sell me a MiG, and he said that you really have to know how to fly well, because if you don't know what you're doing, then you can literally detach a retina. Is that true? Do you think that's true, or is that just a sales pitch?
I I don't know. That sounds like some sort of Russian thing he would say. Detach a retina. I don't know too many people that have done that,
So
but
at some
I
point,
wouldn't trust those airplanes.
yeah. So at some point, when you left the military, you probably climbed into a normal civilian plane. At that point, did you feel like you were driving a tricycle compared to the old SR-71?
Well, actually, no. When I left the military, I wanted to pursue my aviation photography. So what I did is I climbed into F-16 Thunderbird jets. I did a book on the Thunderbirds, and I climbed into the Blue Angel F-18s, and I did a whole year with the Blue Angels. So I did some books on them.
Nice.
So I wanted to stay around military jets. I shot pictures for Air National Guard units. I got to fly the F-15 and everything. I even got to fly the F-4 with the Idaho Guard. So I did. I wasn't about to go fly Cessnas. I didn't have any real desire to do that. And I was in the back seat with the cameras and all, and doing all these things. But they'd always let me get a little stick time. It was a lot of fun. And then one day when I was done, around 95, 96, I was done with the Blue Angel project. And I hung up my spurs and I don't fly anymore. My body had, I was born with a crooked spine to begin with. I had scoliosis pretty bad. And they said, the worst thing you could have done it for your body was sit in a cockpit of a fighter jet. And somehow my body was strong enough to do it. But I had 5,000 hours of fighter time and just loved every minute of it, and realized I'd probably go out and kill myself flying Cessnas or little Cherokees or something, doing something crazy, thinking I had more thrust than I really did. And I just hung it up, and I do my nature photography now. I'm very happy with that, and my writing, and I'm a speaker now. So if you do something fully and you really do it, everything you've wanted to do in it, the Blue Angels, Thunderbirds, world's fastest jet, first A-10 squadron. Yeah, I've done so many things that were gratifying. You didn't need to just keep parking your Cessna out at the local Muni airport and feel like that's something you needed to do. As much as I love flying, there comes a point in time, where physically, the kind of flying that I enjoyed doing, I couldn't continue to do. So.
They have an SR-71 on display at the Dulles Aerospace Museum in Virginia. When was the last time you saw that plane, and what kind of memories does it evoke?
I just saw it a couple of years ago. I spoke at the museum there at some little conference. Every time I've seen one at a museum, and I've seen maybe 10 different museums with them, you just have a real feeling of it was a part of you. It's like your family. It's like, and I see a lot of other jets I flew too, the A-10 or the A-7 or something. And it brings back a lot of memories. And it's almost a little sad when you see it quiet, sitting in a museum silent, because you remember it the opposite. But then you're always glad they preserved it and it's still there. And it's always sad. There's a part of you that's attached to every one of those airplanes.
Now, that same museum also has a space shuttle in it. Which impressed you more? Was it the SR-71 at the museum or the space shuttle?
Do you have to ask that question?
I think the SR-71 impresses me more, but I know the space shuttle has a tremendous background as well.
No, the space shuttle was a tremendous technology, and what a terrific concept. The Spirit of St. Louis impresses me when I see it. It doesn't mean that's the plane I want to go flying, but the SR-71 has a presence that's undeniable, and it's just that way.
Has Hollywood ever approached you about doing a movie about your life?
Yes, we're kind of working on one now. I've had several serious, inquiries in the last couple of years. So we'll see. I don't know about that. I'm kind of an introvert at heart. I'm not totally comfortable with that whole concept, but if it's done right, I think the story, what I've learned through all my years of speaking is that it's not about, ooh, look at me, or any chest beating or anything. It's more about here's what I learned in my story, and I want to share it as an inspiration to other people, that everybody has that within them. It doesn't matter if you fly jets or not. I just use the airplane as a vehicle to tell a broader story. So if it is a well done, if the story's done right, and it emphasizes the motivational aspect and the inspirational aspect of you can do more than you think you can do, and I'm living proof of that. So I might entertain.
Well, I have to tell you, I'm very familiar with the work they did with Tom Cruise and Top Gun, the movie. But that story pales in comparison to your life story.
Well, yeah, that wasn't even a story. That was just kind of a fluff piece. And we all went, saw it. We all loved seeing it at the time. It was very Hollywoody and everything. And I just don't want to do it. I wouldn't want to be a part of something like that for me. My story is not just about flying military airplanes. That's just something I did. Mm-hmm. It really is about what you alluded to in the beginning of your show, that attitude. Is it, were you always this way? Did you always think like this? And, why do you want to share that with other people?
Well, before we wrap things up, is there anything you would like to promote?
Well, I'd just say if people are interested in the 2 books I've done that are quite popular now, we just sold another 3 today on the internet. They can go to sleddriver.com, SLEDDRIVER.com. And they can contact me through there if you need a speaker for your event. I just got back from Canada, did a big convention up there in Alberta. It's fun.
Nice.
I'm happy to come and share my story. I won't do it for free. My time is more valuable now to me than the money. I do a lot of bird photography now. I'm out there in the fields a lot. So life is short, goes by quick. And,
it sure does. Well, Brian, it's been a pleasure having you on the John Ark Show. You are a real hero's hero. A lot of people out there claiming to be heroes, but you are an extraordinary hero. I want to wish you continued success, and you are always welcome back on the show, sir.
Well, thank you very much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Thank you very much, and we will talk to you soon. Bye-bye.